Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, the show about ways to stay competitive in a changing market, break through business plateaus, and respond to the changing expectations of today's customers. Your host, Jess Dewell, is a rapid growth entrepreneur, consultant, and business advocate with a 20-year track record of business excellence. She candidly discusses how to achieve your growth strategy and realize your company's unfulfilled potential. Now, here's Jess.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. It's Tuesday, December 18th, and today marks one day closer to the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, the least amount of light that we have, the part where it says, okay, winter's really here, and now what? So we go up against natural inclinations and rhythms out in the world, like trees having lost their leaves, animals that are hibernating, and then us, where we are still moving forward faster, and at this time of the year, potentially even busier. And so to take a step back and talk about what we're going to talk about today is a way to change and shift our brains just a little. You are in the right place for conversations that we as leaders face in business today regarding technology, customer expectations, and changing marketplaces. This program is about what it means to reach our short-term goals and increase confidence in our long-term positioning. This is program 192, 5 Gifts of Business Plateaus. Oh, I love this. Because what got us here is different than what will get us to the next level. And it's our willingness to be uncomfortable, to have courage, and a few other things that underlie these 5 gifts that we are going to talk about. I'm Jess Dewell, founder and CEO of Red Direction. And as our wonderful intro said, I have 20 years experience here advising, consulting, facilitating growth strategy for organizations like yours. Companies that work closely with me learn to ask the right questions, be comfortable with the uncomfortable, and think effectively on their feet. I'm your business advocate, specializing in working with companies at critical points of development, both to balance their growth with the constraints found in leadership and operations. So as we're continuing, as we're going into today, I must admit that this show is one of my favorites that I have planned. By the way, I say that about every show. Those of you who listen long enough know that. And it's 1, because it's right in front of me. 2, it pulls together things that we have seen, heard from elements of the discussion and the learning that we've done over the last 2 seasons and now into our 3rd, as well as the 3rd piece, which is there are still so many stories, disparate information that's actually really not disparate, that provides us the context for what we need, what we want, and provided we're willing to look, see it at the right times. All right, so the 5 gifts of business plateaus. I'm going to list them here so you've got them. Scaling time and talent, scaling processes, communication, especially the weak points of our communication, and then understanding and anticipating changing customer expectations, as well as getting better at change, being motivated to succeed. All right, so here we go. We're going to jump in to the first one right now, scaling time and talent. All of you may have remembered a time, maybe especially for founders, when it was just you and some other people, a small group. And for those of you who are right out of college or finding a job and participating now in a career setting in an office space that might span not only cities, but states and countries around the world, our biggest challenge is scaling talent. Because whatever place we're in either of the groups that I just outlined or one that I didn't outline, is what can we do with our 24 hours in a day? And one of the common mishaps is that we think we can burn the candle at both ends forever. So scaling time and talent. So we only have 24 hours in a day. So what do? We figure out how to stay awake longer. We play hard to work hard. We work hard to play hard, right? All of those isms, if you will, have a place, and they're great for spurts. They're great for sprints. They're not as great for marathons. And we find that because even if we're in flow, even when we love what we're doing, at some point we get tired. And there's only so much we can do to rekindle the passion and the energy to keep burning the candle at both ends. Regardless of the biohacks, regardless of the sleep tricks, whatever else you might be engaging upon. And so we're taking a look at ourselves first, and then those around us in our organizations in terms of this limitation and this gift of a business plateau. Because when we reach a sales plateau, as a leader, holding up the mirror first is the most important thing that we can do. Because every action, every behavior, every chance we get to reinforce or chip away at our organizational culture starts with us. And because we're followed, we're modeled, and and once we recognize that, we know how to move forward. So then I'm thinking about this in terms of an organization, and I'm thinking about this in terms of a team leader, a team lead, a middle manager, executive director, right? We have these people that are working and doing work and also expected to grow and develop talent. And in this place of time, processes and automation have added to our ability to get in touch with what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, to make the most of our 24 hours a day. And of course, the part of that is for the work that we do together in our office, in our organization. And there's this book that was gifted to me called The Management of the Absurd. Okay. Every single one of the things we're talking about today can come back to an element of this book. I will link to it in the show notes. The concept of paradoxes in leadership. You hear me say all the time, let's be comfortable in the uncomfortable, or recognize that we are flying forward with our uncomfortable. And it was so great to see a book that was published in 1996 that has wisdom that is still relevant today, because it's all about how we communicate. It's all about how we relate to ourselves and to others around us in our team. So I'm coming back to then this point of scaling time and talent. We want everybody in our organization, whatever role they play, they're choosing to be there. So we want them to show up and be all in and present during that time. The thing is, how we do it is going to indicate how well we can scale. Because one, we hear people say, it's got to be fun to work together. Okay. We also hear people say that we want this to be comfortable for people to work in. Okay. The thing is, when we get too comfortable or we're having too much fun, we can take our eye off the ball. Even when you, in your role, have your eye on the ball, those around you may not. And so too much fun and too much comfort will be a place where we can look to in a time of a business plateau, a growth plateau, to say, hey, how amazing and interesting is this? And what can we do to just get a little uncomfortable? Not threatening, not uncomfortable to the point people don't want to come to work, uncomfortable faced with problems that when we work together, we can get to where we want to go. I was having a conversation yesterday with a gentleman named David, and he was saying, Jess, it's really interesting that you're having these conversations, because here's something that I have read in many different books and publications. And that is, when you put a team together that is comfortable with each other, and they might be more efficient, but they don't come up with as many ideas to solve problems. When you put a group of people together that don't know each other very well, that might actually have some discord between them, they actually have to work to get to the ideas, and they end up coming up with more ideas, and usually better ideas than the group that works together. So streamlining on one side looks really great and amazing. Well, we have a team, we're really efficient. And then on the other side, it's maybe we don't want to have this extra input, this longer time that it takes. Well, which one is going to get you closer to the next set of growth goals that you have? A little bit of discord. a problem where we work together and we figure out from our past working together how to work together now to break through these bigger ideas, to break through these business plateaus, to get something that we can together put a beginning, a middle, and an end around and figure out what we can do. And that's scaling talent. We are using and growing the innate skills of our teams, as well as important soft skills like problem solving, like courage, like listening, just to name a few. So when we find ourselves spread too thin, when we feel like we need more talent, but we're not ready to make that investment or take the time to do what it takes to add the next 5 or 50 employees to our organization, let's see who's in the room together. Let's see what ideas they're coming up with, because maybe it doesn't take 5 or 50. Maybe it takes a different combination of the team to figure out what's necessary and be able to make the time to figure out how to scale our time and our talent. So we are not burning the candle at both ends at our work time, which means we're not burning our candle at both ends outside of our work time. And overall, our brains are working better and we understand what problem solving is, and we can lead with letting every position, every role be independent, understand what it means to solve problems, and take the initiative, take a step, think about what comes next to scale that time and talent. All right, how about processes, right? Scaling processes. Now this one is interesting because I think about technology and I think about efficiencies. And we have in the past, right, we've got the Six Sigma efficiency processes, and we have all of these technologies that increase our productivity. And in doing so, sometimes we end up feeling like we are ruled by the process. We're ruled by the guidebook. And we as not only our individual, we ourselves, but we as our collective, our team. And it becomes mundane to engage in the role that we're in. It becomes a little more, well, even if we're sitting, even more sedentary, if you will, because we have this lane that we're in and it's always the same because we've decided that we know what's most efficient and this process is it. Well, what happens if we were to break the process, right? To scale a process means to put strain on the processes, the system in place, and see what happens. And really, the system is always going to break. The people may break in terms of not knowing what to do, or being really uncomfortable, or speaking out about something not working. But if we're kept in a lane too long without any disharmony, what ends up happening is we're like, well, I'm not going to stick my neck out for that. I'm not going to be the one to do this. I guess I'll start punching a clock. And then our productivity goes down in a whole different way. So balancing this concept of technology to a point that empowers independence at every level, as well as working with what we need, what we have, and looking at the processes we have and thinking, well, what if we did it differently? What is the curiosity that comes in when we are thinking about the inputs that are coming in from our feedback loops? What are we getting in our knowledge base for customer objections, for the people who are purchasing their problems in the interactive points of our touch points between us and the companies that we are servicing, or us and the consumers that we are providing services to? All right. And so thinking about scaling this process, it comes back to this concept of management of the absurd. We end up managing the process instead of managing the product, or managing the process instead of spending time developing relationships. And we know that we're selling people to people. We know we're belly to belly. We know all of these different things. Yet in practice, technology can bind us a little too tightly. So I'm thinking about the easiest ways that end up happening to scale processes. There's one of two things that ends up happening. We lose one of our top clients, or we gain somebody into that top client echelon of our business. In both of those cases, we find out where we are doing well and where we are doing less well. So when a new client comes in and all of a sudden they're incredibly large and they demand a lot of time, every single process we have becomes strained. And things may actually break. And that's in some cases exactly what we want. Okay, that would also be, this same concept would also apply if we said our sales were X this month, and we're going to double these sales to Y next month, and then we're going to double those sales to Z in 3 months after that. Okay, same thing. We are pushing for the processes. We are pushing what we know our processes can do, and we're seeing where the rubber meets the road and what improvement can be. Now, it's great that that's happening. It's typically really bad timing, isn't it? Because we need our processes totally pushed to the limits and to the point of breaking when we're not in the middle of adding a new client or doubling sales or figuring out how to replace a client that left. Which is kind of this interesting gift, because when we are taking and putting energy toward thinking about things and unintended consequences, right? An unintended consequence of bringing on a new large client is many of our systems could break, and they may not be the ones we anticipated. All right, well, knowing that that's there is at least some sort of knowing. It's not completely unknown, yet we can't plan for it. Yet we can't depend on it, because it's only through how the people are working together, what the processes are actually doing, and once they're pushed to the limit, do we get to see what is actually breaking, broken, or weak. And here's the other thing. The processes we think worked really well for where we were at may not be the right processes for where we are going. So there's a secondary piece of how do we look at scaling processes? How do we look at this concept of we have to now double what we're doing with the same amount of people and maybe even the same technology? So what do we do? How do we do it? Can we look at this differently? And yes, it is hard. It is hard to slow down in the midst of that fast-paced change to notice. Yes, it is hard to just not throw Band-Aids, to just, our inclination is, well, we'll fix it later. We've got to keep going. The thing is, when we are achieving our growth strategy and we are leaping and bounding forward, we don't have time. And then when things stop or slow down, we have forgotten the places that we have Band-Aided because we've done them for so long in such the same way, they become normalized. And our Band-Aids become a part of who we are as an organization. And so this concept of, can we break apart fast-paced growth or a lack of fast-paced growth with what we're doing to see where did we Band-Aid processes in the past? Where did we go for the quick fix because that's what time or people have always said to do, right? Get through and then address it later. And then it's like, well, it seems to be working, so let's just make it that way. Well, we're talking about efficiency. We're also talking about longevity of our people. We're also talking about increasing our knowledge base. We're also talking about increasing independence at every level so that we have more confidence as we are reaching different growth goals. So in a business plateau, even a healthy one, like we're doubling sales, and all of a sudden we don't make that doubling our sales in the 3 months after. Maybe it takes us 6 months. Well, that's still a business plateau. And it's a good one because we're making money, we're profitable, yet it's not where we want to be. It's not what we have pitched to others. It's not the plan that we have had. It's not the plan we're communicating to our people. And when we aren't doing that, it's easy to retreat. It's easy to say, well, it's this and this and this. They're outside of our control. Well, yeah, everything's outside of our control. So when we can own it, we can accept what's going on with our processes and recognize that there are going to be unintended outcomes in this arena as well to support what do we want to do, and have we become too dependent on the technology processes and lost the curiosity and the willingness to question and look for ways to continuously get better as we grow. All right. We're going to answer 2 audience questions, and then we're going to keep on going. The first is from Kate. In what ways can I scale talent with the team that works really well? Okay, I'm going to read this out loud and then I'm going to adjust it a little. But for very long, that has worked really well and has worked together a lot to get to the next step of growth. All right, Kate, are you ready for this answer? The answer is add somebody new to the team that nobody has worked with as much. maybe somebody that nobody's worked with ever, and see what comes out of that, right? There's all kinds of human dynamics that come into play. And when we start compensating for each other's strengths and weaknesses, when we find how we work really well together, we still need to have a little sizzle. Every relationship needs that. Personal relationships with each other or with, significant others, with our children, whatever. If we're always doing the same thing, sometimes they get stagnant. Well, the same thing happens in teams that are doing and solving the same problems. They get into the way that they think together. And then internally, unintendedly, there are limits that are placed on. They're only going to come up with things within this framework with which they work well. So to get to the next step of growth, to change up a very efficient team, put a new person in there, put a different person in there, pull one of the existing people out. Maybe it's everybody on your team. So pull somebody out. What happens? And then watch and see. There will be relationship dynamics. Things will slow down. They might on paper, and time-wise, not move as fast. There will be results and differences that are noticeable in the output. And with guidance and safety around the fact that it's okay to disagree, it's okay to look at new things, anything is possible in that capacity. And so we remove some of our limitations and we get to find places to grow our talent and our talents, our skills, our soft skills, as well as those that work with us. All right, second question is from Dale. Jess, are you saying that internal disruption in the workplace is actually good? If so, can you put some parameters to it? Okay, this is around scaling processes. So thank you, Dale. Yes, the answer is I am saying that. And I'm not saying disruption like we have to reinvent something or we have to be innovating. I'm saying, yeah, within our system, when we are stress testing our systems, because remember, people rely on regular patterns and routines. Yet at the same point in time, that's our brains going, here's how we make the most of our time, and we can overlook some of those things. We can take shortcuts to get to where we want to know because we know enough to make an assumption. And that's happening on our subconscious level. And so when something were to change unexpectedly, like onboarding a new client that is a large client, or any of the other things that we talked about in that section, what ends up happening is our systems become tested against our own assumptions. And so Dale, having the assumptions question along the way with a separate process that throws a kink in something. What can we do to throw a kink in something once in a while to test our systems and be ready to be able to not only handle what is happening and what the results are? Do we prioritize strengthening those parts of our processes? Or is it just good enough to know? And that's going to depend on a whole bunch of other factors within your organization. Regardless, you know where things in processes are weak. You know where assumptions have been. And now we can take those assumptions and look at them and find out if they're still true today and if they're true when we look at them in relationship to the growth path we are on. All right, so thank you for those two questions, Kate and Dale. Keep them coming in. This is the voice of Bold Business Radio, and you can keep joining the conversation by using hashtag VBBRadio. You can also send us email, radio@reddirection.com. We'll be right back.
You are listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio. In every program, we share stories, tips, and concepts that benefit short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. For additional perspectives on your growth strategy, Jess Dewell is your business advisor and consultant. Go to voiceofboldbusiness.com and click the Find Out More button to get started. Now, back to Jess.
This is program 192, the 5 gifts of business plateaus. And yes, I'm Jess Dewell, your business advocate in and advising and consulting on growth strategy in your organization. All right, so we talked about 2 of the 5 pieces at the first half of the program: scaling time and talent, scaling processes. Now we are going to get into the other 3. Communication weak points, changing customer expectations, and getting better at change overall. And everything that we're talking about, by the way, is going to lead nicely to a wrapped up package of that last one. And you will see how that unfolds here as we go. Because while I see it, it is still to be determined based off of not only the questions that come in using hashtag VBB Radio or email radio@reddirection.com. We also have the stories and the articulation of what's coming next. So let's talk about communication weak points. Our biggest thing with communication is that everybody has their own way of doing it, right? I watch in my spare time the Madam Secretary, one of my favorite shows that's always inspiring because regardless of positioning around, everybody's coming together with external things that are always pressuring their systems and processes and thoughts and bringing people of discord together in at least one point to connect. Well, in this show, the personal assistant to the Secretary of State has changed jobs, still in the Secretary of State's office, no problem, but doing a different role. And the person who came in has their own way of organizing, communicating, presenting everything that there is going on in the day. And he's freaking out. He can't let go of his old role and really step in and be fully present because he's hung up, because he doesn't think the person who came in behind him is efficient enough, will do it well enough, and he's really worried about it. Well, that's a pride thing, isn't it? I mean, holding up that mirror. And I'll bet, by the way, I had that happen today, just today as well. That pride pops up. And so when we can own the fact that we're getting in our own way, we also recognize where our communication is weak. So it's a point of an awareness. Oh, okay, I'm doing this thing again. What's the reason? Oh, yeah, I apparently am really attached to that for some reason. Okay, can I find the reason? Do I want to know the reason? Right? So as a leader, we're asking those questions in terms of communication because what we say and what we do is adding to our culture. And it may be a different culture than what we have put in our mission and our vision and our values. And so that's one of those other unintended consequences that just because we have something, we might even be using it sort of well. Our culture may actually be different. And this is where communication can be the key to getting through a business plateau, right? This gift of not only self-awareness, but how we communicate. So another book that I absolutely love, you've heard referenced on the show before, is called Simple: Conquering the Crisis of Complexity. Well, when we're throwing Band-Aids on things and we've got the biggest quick fixes and we're burning the candle at both ends, another place we fail is keeping things simple and straightforward. We're all throwing stuff on to figure out how it works. And now it's like adding unnecessary things to the pot and figuring out how to use them. Well, it creates complexity, right? It creates so many processes that we don't know what might break or not. We don't even know why we have some of the processes because it happened somewhere and then it became part of what we do and then it became normal. And so it goes back to somewhat questioning those assumptions. But another piece is looking at it from another perspective. If you ever have thought about this, right? I'm thinking now about employee handbooks. Employee handbooks are created with a good intention. And then as time goes by and more people are added and different situations happen, stuff gets added to the employee handbook. Well, sometimes a 5-page employee handbook turns into a 35-page employee handbook in just a couple of years. Huh? How come? Because of all of these things that were documented, that were seen as a problem, and then just written down, and now here it is, without any thought to what does that look like in another situation? Is this really, whatever this problem is that we've overcome, is it something that we see happening again? Well, if it is, it's part of our culture. So just putting it in the handbook is not enough. We still have a broken culture. We still have broken communication. So that's an example of a place where there's complexity, trying to fix problems or prevent problems that have this interesting outcome of people not reading or knowing, number one. And number two, there is so much stuff going on that there is to remember that we're not going to remember it when we're doing our jobs. Us, every single person in that organization. So we may be breaking some crazy rule and law, like, I don't know, I know there are states, here's like states that have laws that you can't play checkers on Sunday. Okay, what good is that anymore? Number one, how many people play checkers on a regular basis anyway? And number two, really, we're going to try and dictate to the people outside, in a way that impedes how they work or what they work, that actually might make them more beneficial, in this case, to their community, or to have connection, but more importantly, within our organization, to be willing to speak up. Because if we tell everybody what they can't and all the reasons why they can't, they're not going to try and figure out where they can. We need less of what we can't and more of opportunity shaped by the actions that we take. So take a look at that. And I'm thinking about, this conquering the crisis of a complexity. There's another place that this shows up, and this is in customer service. We tend to have all of these things because sometimes we want to outsource our customer service. Sometimes we want to outsource that first phase of things because it's much more cost effective in the business model and whatever the case may be. Okay, so we've decided to outsource. So what our outsourcing partners want is exactly a flow chart. Do this, A, B, or C are the outcomes. Based off of that, I can move down and move through the problem. Well, when we do that, all we're doing is adding complexity to the people who are calling the customer service for help. The people who are receiving the call and going through this flow chart are doing exactly what they were asked to do. Customers are really frustrated because they know enough or feel like they have done enough that just saying, yes, I've already tried that is not good enough. They expect there's this dichotomy of, come on, you've got to take my steps to get my help. And this person is like, but I've already used this and this is why I need your help. Complexity. Within an organization, it can be the same thing. Think about departments that have become silos. Think about how if it has been supported that each department is going in their own way to achieve the goal that they have been set or the company has set, without any cohesion and checkpoints about how the work that one department is doing is supporting or impeding the work of another, which is supporting or impeding the work of another, right? There's an element of communication in that. So by not creating parameters, we have weak communication. By creating too many parameters, we create frustration and a lack of a desire to keep figuring things out on our own. And so it's going to come back to the business perspective of growth will come from, do we have independence at every level? And are we willing to sit with the uncomfortable and allow others to sit with uncomfortable without us solving their problems? That's what it is about communication. If you look back on your life, this could be work or go back farther into your college years or childhood or whatever. What are the lessons that you really remember? The lessons that you remember came from some sort of hardship. When we are removing hardship or we are trying to increase efficiency by creating all of these parameters to remove hardship, we end up not having enough discord. We end up not having enough thoughts that are coming in, swirling around in the pot to see what can bubble up to be the best. And the companies that are able to do this are the ones that not only have strong cultures, they also have strong growth strategies and have a record of achieving them each year, each 3-year, each 5-year cycle, whatever that looks like, in a business plan that may span 5 to 10 to 20 years. And in fact, it's great to see the role of a business plan coming back into small and medium-sized organizations. I was having a conversation probably a week and a half ago with a gentleman who is in his 3rd year of business, and they're talking about how to scale, and they were asking for some of these things because they had hit a plateau. So we were talking about some of these points. And I said, so tell me about your business plan. And the first thing that came out of his mouth is, I have a plan that will last 100 years. He didn't say I have a 100-year business plan. I have a plan that will last 100 years, which means he's built in communication to adapt and change as things happen. He has also built in the necessary knowledge that there will be technology. This is a technology company. Technology will be disrupted, yet it can still be handled and approached. So can we make it simple? The answer is yes. Does it have classic staying power? When the answer is yes, we might be simple enough, and it may be worth holding up what are our assumptions around this to see where else we can go. All right, so that was our second book and our third piece. So the fourth gift is Anticipating changing customer expectations, right? If we think about this in terms of demand, if we think about this in terms of new markets, growing existing markets, reducing churn, whatever the case may be, all of those things come back down to one thing. What are our customers the customers we are trying, the potential customers we are trying to reach, what are they actually doing and how are they actually behaving? Well, all we can do is look. And you heard me mention knowledge base earlier. I would say a knowledge base becomes incredibly necessary. And knowledge bases are hard. They're hard because all of this information is coming in and it's raw and it's unfiltered and it's unrefined. And so finding a process that will help organize all of this raw data to at least pull out patterns that we're looking for, or patterns we're not even looking for, the ones that just emerge, will be incredibly useful. And so having somebody take extra time to put information out of their head or from their personal notes to do their job really well into another thing that's something that everybody will be able to see and pull from, well, that's a little bit of an obstacle because we're already pressed for time every day. Being able to then recognize there's some pattern in the role that we're in, from the questions that we're answering, from the customers that we are servicing, all of that. Now what, right? Now what? We want to go to this knowledge base. Well, if we didn't have enough time to put stuff into this knowledge base, we're not going to get anything out of it. And so we actually have maybe twisted our ankle twice, right? The first time we didn't take the time to put stuff in and then it's fleeting. The second time when we recognize the pattern, we want to confirm what we're seeing, yet there's nothing there because there is not enough adoption within an organization. And so to change customer expectation, to anticipate changing customer, I'm going to start that one all over. To anticipate changing customer expectations starts with sharing information that I learn, that you learn, that the person that's working with us learns, other people in other departments learn, and how can we find patterns across all of those to be able to see, oh, their reason for buying our product is shifting. Oh, the types of customer service questions that are coming in are focusing in this area. We stopped getting support around this particular function of our product. Okay, all of those indicate something has changed. A competitor has come in and out under the radar. Somebody else is offering a solution that does what they need to do better or fits in with their growth goals. And so that's an important piece as well, is having this knowledge base of information. What are the patterns that we're seeing emerge, and what are the patterns of things that have disappeared? And can we dig into what those are? So we're looking at both sides. We're looking at what we are looking for. We know we're looking for changes, but we can also look for change from things that stop, from things that have ceased, and go from there and start to explore a little bit more and be able to ask different questions. I was reading today in another book. I don't think I have it here. Oh yeah, it was in the Simple book. Here it is. I even bookmarked this page for us. There was a page where it talks about Michael Bloomberg is looking for clarity in, where is it? Looking for clarity in his in being able to take something that's really big and hairy, right? Like all of the different services in New York City, and make it as easy for the people coming in to have a good experience as possible, making it easy as possible. So there can become a ripple effect, because when we're always looking for patterns and we're looking how to make it easy, it doesn't matter how complicated it is on the back end. It doesn't matter what the internal process looks like when it has been tried and tested. It doesn't have too many band-aids thrown on in the behind the scenes to make stuff happen. And it's also about empowering our people to ask questions. One of the things that they talked about is that these sweeping strokes happen. So they were talking about Manhattan, and they instituted a training for just a few of their customer service people that fit this certain profile. And they taught them, how do they ask probing questions? Well, by being able to ask probing questions, what ends up happening is we can find the real problem sooner, according to this book and this case study, and we can address them and actually get solutions and answers for the callers. And then it doesn't really matter what's going on behind the scenes or what they have to do. The caller had a single point of contact, had a good experience getting a solution or an answer, and off they go. And it's because of just a small subset of people that were trained in a different way to be able to figure out what's going on. Now, what they learn can then be used in other parts of the system that are big and hairy and ugly behind the scenes to streamline and create other sweeping conversation and opportunities for growth by removing the complexity for whoever our end user is. And having then this small group becomes an internal disruptor, going back to Dale's question. And then we've got the fifth gift, getting better at change, being motivated to succeed. Well, the first thing I said at the beginning was, we need to have, and in this case, it is need. We need to be willing to look at ourselves and do some self-reflection. Once we can do that, we now have the ability to look outward and see things for what they really are, the good, the bad, the ugly, the overhyped, the underhyped, whatever it is, and be able to bring that in, right? We have a sense of more. We have a sense of what we see and what we don't see has a place in our decision making. Well, to be able to look at things we see is one thing. To be able to seek out additional information and points of view is another thing. An often overlooked thing is the courage to actually do it. So we can say we're doing it. We might be doing it just enough, but are we really owning it and stepping up and taking courageous steps to look at the things we don't want to look at, that are testing our systems, that are putting pressure on our talent, that are actually impacting how and who is interacting with our company? And that's courage. And typically we undermine our own courage, depending on what your growth strategy is, depending on which of these 5 gifts or the umpteen bazillion other ones we're not talking about today, you are facing. Your need for courage and the courage you must have to invoke change will be different. And that's something that I think is really important to know. My courage is going to look different than your courage. Your courage is going to look different than one of your peers' courage. And I think it's important to recognize that, because when we allow somebody else to dictate what courage is, we're giving away our power. And when we give away our power, we are placing a different priority on the information coming in. When we allow the status quo, we forget that there are assumptions to question. And more importantly, I have to look this one up because I did bookmark this page too. When those two things happen, we tend to be okay with not knowing and not seeing, and we begrudgingly and then outright refuse to look at things that could help us grow. And so when somebody else tells us what courage is and we don't think that's courageous, or when somebody says, man, that took a lot of courage, and we're like, what are you talking about? Well, this is just one illustration of how courage shows up. The person who complimented your courage, they're working on that, and they're noticing the type of courage they need to do their job, to have the relationships and be all in to those relationships to do a good job, to do the job they want, to do a job that will make them feel fulfilled, as well as achieve success and stay on the path to their next success. So when we're thinking about this and we're thinking about how we use courage, it's totally thinking about, right? This is bringing it all back to getting better at change. This is a place we need courage. Say it. I want more courage around change. I want more courage around looking at problems. I want more courage hearing things I don't want to hear. I want more courage to observe what is causing other people frustration and impeding their ability to do their job. Whatever it might be, I want courage asking for what I want. I want courage to say, man, that's really outside of how we work together here, and it must change. Those are all places within business that we need courage, and some of us are good at some of them, and some of us are good at others of them, and a few of you may be good at all of those. Well, keep practicing that courage. Keep practicing that courage. Okay, so we have a question from Gabe that has come in. I consider myself aware of communication blind spots and I work on them. But what happens and how do we remove the obstacles when communication problems aren't ours, but on one of the team members unwilling to change? Gabe, this is a good question because here's the deal. When somebody doesn't want to change or is unwilling to change, there's some reason they are invested so much in that position, and it may be not be us. I would like you to take a second look and look at yourself and find out what are you and how are you showing up? Is there something that you're doing that causes this other person to be defensive? Is there something that you're doing that's causing this other person to feel belittled or undermined or some other thing where our brain takes over and goes, I'll show you. And because maybe that's it. And maybe it's nothing to do with you, but until you look at all of those things, you can't rule it out to something else. And provided you rule everything out, or you're willing to be courageous and just ask the question, by the way, you must be willing to hear the answer. Ask them, hey, I've tried to show up a whole bunch of different ways. You're showing up in this way. Please tell me more about that. And then we can find out if it's really you or if it's something else. And if it's something else, then it's a conversation of, oh, I'm so glad it's not me because I thought I was causing this. It still doesn't help us get the job done. So what can I do to support you so that we can meet together in a different way, right? That's a courageous conversation. That's something that we have to face. And are we willing to face it? So thank you for the question. Tell me how it goes. Use hashtag VBB Radio. Email me, radio@reddirection.com, and tell me the outcome of that because I'm very curious how the conversation goes. It's courageous to have those conversations, and being able to ask the question we hadn't thought of before is a different kind of courage. And it's also an openness to continue developing effective leading skills by being present and aware ourselves. All right, so here we have a question from Olivia. So, software evolves from beta to 1.0 to 2.0 and so forth. Is that the sort of workplace changes you're talking about? Some incremental, some generational? Maybe. And I would say that's definitely an approach. I've seen many organizations that do that they are iterating every single step of the way. They want to try something out. They want to see how it works. They want to fix the bugs. They want to have a new release. They want to see what the response is. They want to have and make some change. They want to have another release. That works. And depending on, I really think it depends on the organization though. Some organizations that are working with structures and they're working fast towards something and they're willing to go, yeah, that worked or that didn't work. Here we go. We're going to go move forward. Well, this worked, but that didn't work, right? As long as it's fast, I've seen it work well. When it's slow, those changes that aren't working, they kind of end up, the change that has an unwanted outcome, if it sits around too long, it becomes part of the norm. And so then it becomes harder to change. And so sometimes it's necessary to find, that's assumptions, by the way. Where are our assumptions? What's happening? Throw a wrench in it and just see what's going on and iterate what comes up from throwing the wrench in. And consider innovating and iterating internal processes faster. There is a time also to slow down because the companies that do innovate and iterate these internal change quickly, just like they iterate and product changes and get them to market quickly to find out if they work or not, right? Internal, we're taking that process and turning it internal here. If we ignore what we find, it will come back and it will be a bigger problem later. And so when we are moving fast, we have to always make sure that we have checks and balances so we're not ignoring what we find and we are actually recognizing that whatever we found is going to impact the next test and it's going to impact the next test. And if we forget about it or leave it out, it also becomes normal. And then that whole wrench needs to come in, mix it all up and see what happens. Neither one is easy. Neither one is fast, even though we say do it fast to make change fast. Change in an organization takes time, and it starts from our actions and our words, and do they line up? Does what we do to deliver the product line up with what we say our mission is? How we work together here is defined by our values, and are our values defined in such a way that corporate let's just say sustainability. I was going to say something else. Responsibility. I was going to say corporate responsibility. That corporate responsibility means the same or is defined enough that I know what that means for me, as well as what it means to my peers, as well as what it means to people on other teams, things like that. That's where there are some gaps in communication. So sometimes business plateaus can totally be done with how to change them up processes. I'm positing today that change, that the growth plateaus that we have come from how we work together here, and what does it look like when we take advantage of scaling time and talent differently, scaling processes for maximum output, communication and understanding what the weak points are for ourselves and for our teams and being on the lookout for them, recognizing that customer expectations will change and how we will see new patterns, as well as the loss or the removal or the fact that some just go away. What does that actually mean? And the last one, getting better at change and iterating and making sure that we are closing those gaps as much as we can and speaking up when we recognize that there is a gap between what we say and what we do, or what the company says and what the company does, and what we're asked to do versus what we're rewarded on. All of those things. Wow, this has been a fully informationally packed show. I will put a whole bunch of things in the show notes for us. Thank you for joining us live today. Thank you for listening after the fact, for those of you who do. All the program notes will be at voiceofboldbusiness.com/p192. That is voiceofboldbusiness.com/p for program 192. You may also search the site for 5 gifts of business plateaus. Keep this conversation going now. What do you see? What are your experiences breaking through the plateaus that have been mentioned here? And what has the gift been from that? And if you are facing another plateau, share that as well. Part of the conversation, because this program is on iTunes, iHeartRadio, YouTube. So stop by, tell us what you thought of this show and how you are facing this within your organization today. We want to learn from each other's experiences and apply those takeaways